there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports. And as you can tell, I'm not in my normal recording studio. I'm actually at my girlfriend's for the holiday week here after the 4th of July. So hopefully you guys don't mind the change a little bit. I know it's a little bit more distracting in the background, but hopefully the content you still feel like is up to par. And in this video, we're going to be talking about Kevin Durant. He's been really the headliner throughout all of NBA free agency, and really after the draft, when all the news came out the day of NBA free agency that Kevin Durant wanted a trade out of Brooklyn. Absolutely incredible news that really shook up the world, the NBA world specifically. I was live on the channel when that happened, so if you were watching during that, welcome back to the channel for another video. If you guys are new, hit that subscribe button. Otherwise, if you've been watching a few of our videos but haven't subbed yet, would love to know as to why maybe you haven't up to this point. And we are working on some things to really improve some of the content and the way that everything presents on the channel. So hopefully you guys are looking forward to that as well. Smash that like button if you are. And now for a video preview. First, we're going to talk about suitors for Kevin Durant and what KD's value could look like. Now, I'm a little bit lower on Kevin Durant than I think most are. Not that I think he's a bad player. He's still a top 5 player in the world. But I think there's some hesitancy that some teams should have that maybe fans and media outlets aren't talking about as much, just because yes, it's Kevin Durant. Trade packages for KD, what could the Nets potentially get in return? I didn't talk about any 3 or 4 team trades in this one. Now I think it's very possible that Brooklyn could incorporate other teams to get something done, and we'll talk about that a little bit. I don't have any specific packages around that, but it's very easy to open up packages to a third team, especially if it's including draft picks for players. And then I also talk in each package what I wouldn't give up for Kevin Durant. If I was running a team, what players would I say, nope, Brooklyn, no way you're getting that guy if I'm trading for Kevin Durant? Because ultimately, if you're trading for KD, you're trying to win. You can't strip down your entire roster around him and still win. We've seen that before. Oklahoma City ultimately didn't get the job done. Brooklyn clearly did not get the job done, not even an Eastern Conference Finals appearance for Kevin Durant in his time there. So if you're getting Kevin Durant, you need to have other players in your roster. That's the clear and obvious truth. It's the truth for all players. You just can't win with a one-man show. That's not how basketball works. It's a team sport, always has been, always will be. So if you're a team trading for him, you have to, keep your boundaries and say, we're not going to give up every single good player we have. So let's look at KD's value here. He's 34 years old by the start of the season, which is quite a bit older than I think a lot of people, first of all, assume. And first of all, a lot more old than I think I'd be willing to trade a ton of draft picks for. The world went crazy when Rudy Gobert got traded to a relatively young team. And by the way, Rudy Gobert is 4 years younger than Kevin Durant. Now, Gobert's clearly not as good of a player as Kevin Durant, but again, you're trading for a 34-year-old. Do you want to give up first rounders in 2027 and 2029 for a guy who at that point would be 41 years old? I'm not sure. He just came off his worst postseason ever as well. They got swept by the Boston Celtics. Kevin Durant could not get to the rim in that series, and honestly played some of the worst basketball I think anyone's ever even seen him play, including his rookie season with the Seattle Supersonics. It just did not look like Kevin Durant. Now, he was dealing with some injuries, which he's sustained a ton of in his career, which is another reason why you look at his value and say, do you want to commit everything to him? He's 34, just came off his worst postseason performance ever, and has had so many serious injuries in his career, many that have been perceived as potentially career-threatening. Some of the foot injuries he's had to deal with. He's also suffered some knee injuries. But he's Kevin Durant, which is why, when I talk about him, he's still a top 5 player in the world. He's still a player that everyone will want to trade for. There's no surprise that, 15 teams have called Brooklyn asking about Kevin Durant's availability and potential packages. If I was running a team, heck, I'd give him a call, see what I could potentially land Kevin Durant for. Now, Brooklyn's not going to do something crazy here. They're going to make sure they're thorough in this process and get a good return on value for Kevin Durant, because again, you're trading Kevin Durant. Despite all the negatives here that I listed, he's still one of the most valuable players in the world. Although I think fans kind of overestimate his value a little bit, at least in trade discussions between executives. So let's get into suitor number 1 here. It's the Phoenix Suns, and Phoenix was listed as his number 1 option. We're going to talk about them first, then we're going to go to Miami, and then I've got 4 other additional teams on top of these 2 to talk about in this video. Obviously, it doesn't encompass all 29 teams in the league. That video would probably be about 2.5 hours long. I don't know if anyone has time to watch all of that. So if you do want to know about a specific team, you can either comment or go follow us on Twitter and DM me on there, and I will be answering. But back to Phoenix. If I'm running Phoenix, what would I not give up? Devin Booker or Chris Paul. There's no way I'm parting with either of those two players. And I'd also be semi-hesitant about far out draft picks for a specific reason here with Phoenix. Now, this is very team-based and individualized per team that we talk about here. If I was a team that's quite a bit younger, I'd be all in on giving up far out draft picks to get Kevin Durant and, maybe open up my championship window right this second. I completely agree with that perception, but for Phoenix, I'd be a little bit more hesitant, and there's no way I'm giving up Booker or CP. If you give up one of those two players, yes, you're getting a little bit better because Kevin Durant's better than both of those two guys, but Booker's more valuable than Kevin Durant right now. I don't think that Phoenix would even trade Booker for KD 1-for-1. I don't think that they would even entertain that for a second. And I don't think they'd want to trade Chris Paul for Kevin Durant, even though, KD, again, better player than CP. Phoenix wants to have the big three, the big trio, so you can't give up either of those two. And I know there's reports right now that Brooklyn wants Booker back. Okay, and there's a lot of situations where, if you want something to go right in your life, doesn't mean it's going to happen. Okay, Brooklyn's not getting a Devin Booker. They're not getting some of the top players from some of these teams with some of their young guys. It's just not going to happen. And again, for Phoenix here, Chris Paul's sustained a ton of injuries. So has Kevin Durant. Both of these guys are a little bit older, deep into their 30s. Yes, you have Booker to mitigate some long-term risk, but at the same time, do you want those two retiring on you at some point? Then you have all those draft picks you still owe. I'd be a little bit more hesitant, but ultimately, if you feel like that's what it takes, you probably go out and do it. So here's a potential trade package. Brooklyn receives DeAndre Ayton via sign and trade, which is already a little tricky. You need Ayton to want to go there. You can't force Ayton to sign anything. If Ayton doesn't want to go to Brooklyn, or he doesn't want to re-up in Phoenix at all, he could go sign with Indiana right now, or he could, try and facilitate a sign and trade with Detroit. There's options out there for Ayton that does not include Brooklyn. So you need his help a little bit in something like this. Then Mikal Bridges, a player who I would really be hard pressed to give up on if I'm Phoenix. I really like Mikal Bridges, finished second in Defensive Player of the Year voting this year. I think there was a good argument for him to be first among perimeter defenders. And I think he's one of the more impactful perimeter defenders in the league, honestly. When you look at, his length, size, his ability to pick up full court, he's got really quick feet. And then again, that wingspan is just gigantic, and he's not even an offensive negative. In fact, he's a pretty good offensive plus, highly athletic. Again, if you're giving up Mikal Bridges, you better be getting something good. Luckily, you are here with Kevin Durant. Then Cam Johnson, I put a little asterisk here by his name because I think Phoenix, again, would be very hard-pressed to give him up. They feel like they got a steal in him with where they drafted him in the lottery. When most people reacted with a, whoa, that's a giant reach, Phoenix felt really good about that pick and would be, again, not in a position where they want to give up on him. But again, to get Kevin Durant, you have to give up some of this young talent. Then you give up 2023, 2025, 2027 first unprotected, a 2029 first, top 10 protected. I think that Phoenix would really fight to put that protection on there just to cover themselves a little bit long term. And then also the pick swaps in 24, 26, and 28, which is, again, not preferred to have to give up that much stuff. But if you feel like it wins you a championship, and I think Phoenix would arguably become the obvious favorite with KD, Booker, and CP, it's hard to not make that trade if you're in Phoenix's shoes right now. Otherwise, if you don't execute a trade, maybe you watch Kevin Durant go somewhere else in the West, or just ultimately maybe you can't match up with a Dallas or a Golden State moving forward. And what if you never win one? Then you'd always be questioning yourself, why didn't we trade for Kevin Durant? What if we did? Again, there's steps in this, and it's not just this easy for Phoenix to make a trade. They need a lot of things to go right. They need Brooklyn to want Ayton. They need Ayton to want Brooklyn. It's not fully in their control, which is one of the reasons why I'm a little bit more pessimistic about Phoenix's chances in this, which is why a team that I prefer a little bit later on in this video we'll talk about, and why I think they should actually be considered the favorite to land Kevin Durant. Now, suitor number 2, the Miami Heat. And again, this was number 2 on his preferred teams list, but it doesn't mean he's a lock to go to one of these two teams. I think Miami, again, is a very interesting team that if they landed Kevin Durant would probably be considered the favorite. But it's not just that easy, especially given the fact that if you're going to try and contend, you can't give up Jimmy Butler, and you really don't want to give up Bam Adebayo. And if you wanted to include Bam Adebayo, you really can't until another Ben Simmons trade were to take place, which means either Miami would have to bring in Ben Simmons in this deal, which means you're getting into really high numbers in terms of trades. You're going to have to make a big move here and really upset your roster and really turn over a lot of things for a team that was one game away from making the finals. Do you have the stomach to do that? to bring in Ben Simmons. You don't even know if he's going to play to get Kevin Durant ultimately. And you're giving up a player like Bam Adebayo, who's arguably a top 5 center in the league already, and probably has a ceiling to get up into the top 3. He's a very good young player. You do not want to just give him up in this deal to land Kevin Durant. So I think those 2 players are off the table for me, which is really what limits their return here. Yes, you can send Tyler Hero. That's the headliner here. I think he's probably a better player than anything Phoenix can give up. I would argue Mikal Bridges is kind of in the same area, which I know a lot of people would disagree with. But Bridges does so much more defensively for you than Tyler Hero. You also have to take in Duncan Robinson if you're Brooklyn for the money. Gabe Vincent, Max Strus, Omer Yurtseven, Javonte Smart. That's a collection of 4 solid young players there in Vincent, Strus, Yurtseven, and Smart. Now, do they move the needle in a Kevin Durant trade? Probably not. 2023 first, 2024 pick swap, 2026 pick swap, 2027 first, 2028 pick swap, and a 2029 first. This is really difficult to execute here because in 2025, they actually do not have their own draft pick that belongs to the Oklahoma City Thunder. So to even trade that 2026 pick swap at this point, you would need to go out and lift the protections on that, which means you probably have to incentivize Oklahoma City by sending a few second rounders to them and maybe something else even in return, which again, this is a complicated situation then for Miami. But to get Kevin Durant, you try and exhaust all options. If you need to go out and do some of this stuff, you try and make it work. And if you feel like you have a deal that's close with Brooklyn, you push your chips in and you get it done. If you have Kevin Durant, Bam Adebayo, and Jimmy Butler on your roster going into next season, you're going to be incredibly difficult to beat. And I don't think a lot of teams are really going to have an option to guard that variety of length, size, defensive acumen. There's a lot of talent then there in South Beach. So does Kevin Durant take his talents to South Beach? Ultimately, I don't think so. Again, I do not think that this is the easiest landing spot to see Kevin Durant landing in, but I wouldn't rule them out either. When there's a will, there's a way, and Pat Riley and Miami's cap managers there and Eric Spoelstra, they've shown a willingness to get stuff done in the past. You know, it looked very impossible for Jimmy Butler to sign there. And now a few years later, we know what he's done in Miami. So they're going to try and make it work. I just don't see it ultimately happening though. Which leads us into suitor number 3. And this is the team that I think is most likely to land Kevin Durant. I just have a gut feeling about it. They have the assets to do it. This is a very well-run team. Masai Ujiri knows what he's doing. And the Raptors fans, I think, would really love landing Kevin Durant. So if you're a Raps fan and you want KD on your roster, go ahead and smash that like button right now. Because when I talk about what I wouldn't give up if I'm a Raptors fan or if I'm in, front office there in Toronto, first of all, Scotty Barnes is untouchable. Okay, there's only a few players in the world I would trade Scotty Barnes for right now. I would trade him straight up for Giannis. I would trade him straight up for Luka. And there's a few others on that list as well. Kevin Durant at 34 years old is not one of them. Quite frankly, you get 14 years older. That is a big deal. Scotty Barnes just had a phenomenal rookie season. Will he ever be as good as Kevin Durant? Maybe not, but would you rather have, 8 to 14 years of Scotty Barnes or 2 to 4 years of Kevin Durant? That's really what you got to ask yourself. And for me, I'm taking the 8 to 14 years of Scotty Barnes in his prime. And then the other thing I would not give up is any combination of 3 starters. When you look at the 5 best players on Toronto, which is, Fred VanVleet, Gary Trent Jr., OG Anunoby, Scotty Barnes, Pascal Siakam, I'm not giving up 3 of those 5. I'm willing to part with 2 of them and a third piece as well. But you cannot give up 3. Toronto's already been a team that struggled with depth in the past. Now they added Otto Porter Jr. this offseason. I think a really good addition for that team in general. And it gives them the flexibility where if they don't make a trade here for Kevin Durant, I think they're improved still. Scotty Barnes takes a step forward, and we see Trent Jr. and Anunoby. If they both take a step forward and OG specifically stays healthy, that team might be really competitive anyway without Kevin Durant. But we know what Masai Ujiri does. He did this with Kawhi Leonard. He's willing to push the chips in when he feels like it gives his team a chance. And Kevin Durant more than does that. He gives you a really great chance. So here's the deal. Nets receive OG Anunoby, a really great young player who could potentially become an all-star at some point. Yes, I'm that high on OG Anunoby. I think for people who do not watch a lot of Toronto Raptors games, probably don't recognize all the talent this kid has. He is more than a 3-and-D wing. He's 3-and-D plus a lot more. Gary Trent Jr. as well. He is really, progressed in the last couple of seasons. I love the trade for Toronto when they got him for Norm Powell, and I think it's really aged well for them. Just looking at Norm Powell now playing with the Clippers, Gary Trent Jr. is a better player, and I think his defensive acumen as well, next to OG Anunoby, would be a really good starting point here for Brooklyn. This is probably the best young core of players you can receive in a deal. I think Anunoby, Trent Jr., I prefer both of those guys to DeAndre Ayton. I know that might sound crazy to a lot of people, but Ayton's a big who got to play with Chris Paul. I think people are really underestimating what CP's effect was on Ayton's career. Then you get Precious Achiuwa here as well, a very switchable young big. I know there's a lot of upside left in the tank for him, but to get Kevin Durant, Raptors fans, you got to do it. 2023 first, 2025 first, 2027 first, 2029 first, and swap rights in the other 3 years. This is why Toronto's in such a good position to land him. They've got really good young talent in really important spots at the wings with Anunoby, Trent. And let's say that Toronto, or say Brooklyn's like, well, maybe we don't want Trent. Well, if you're Brooklyn, you can say, okay, fine, let's retalk this around Anunoby and Siakam. And if you're Toronto, do you feel fine keeping a core of, maybe something like Van Vliet and Scotty and Trent Jr. and then Kevin Durant and Achiuwa? If maybe you keep Trent and Achiuwa in this deal, send out Siakam instead. This is why Toronto has flexibility, because if Brooklyn wants any of those players outside of Scotty Barnes, you can help facilitate that. If you need to give up Van Vliet and Siakam in a deal here, and you keep Anunoby, Trent, Scotty Barnes, and Kevin Durant, you feel pretty good about that. You could give up 2 all-star level players here and not even really risk your lineup as much as people would think. As long as you're not giving up 3 of your starting level players, you're in a fine shape here now in Toronto, because you're adding back Kevin Durant. They have all of their own first for the next 7 years, so they've got all the flexibility in the world to make a trade like this. And if you get Kevin Durant under contract, we could look at Toronto potentially winning 2 or maybe even 3 championships within the next 4 years. Now, I wouldn't bet on that. It's harder to do that than people think. Just landing Kevin Durant doesn't guarantee you any of that, but you'd have to at least consider them a favorite to land at least one within the next 4 seasons. So now, team number 4, and this is going to be the surprise one here. A lot of people aren't expecting. For me, it's the Utah Jazz. And I know Utah looks like they're in a place where they're going to reshape, build, tear down, and build back up. And yes, Danny Ainge has put them in a position to do that with the Rudy Gobert trade. But let's say Brooklyn really wants draft picks and some quality players right now to not completely bottom out, since Houston has their selections. Utah's one of the better teams to actually facilitate something like this after the Rudy Gobert deal. So what would this look like? Well, first of all, I'm not giving up Donovan Mitchell. And if I'm trading for Kevin Durant, given what Utah just did with Minnesota, they've got a vast collection of role players. I would like to keep at least some or most of those guys if I can. The goal here for me, if I'm Utah, if I'm pushing my chips in on KD, which is really the best opportunity I think Utah would ever have at trading for a star or superstar player, is a guy right now under contract in Kevin Durant. They've got all these draft picks to play with. They just traded Royce O'Neal to Brooklyn for a first. You've got a ton of options here if you are Utah. So again, keep Donovan, keep Kevin Durant, have role players around him. You've got enough offensive firepower. They brought in some defensive-minded role players from Minnesota like Beverly, Jared Vanderbilt, and also Walker Kessler, who's a rookie. You feel pretty good about the team you could probably build up there pretty quickly. So this is the potential trade package. The Nets would get Bojan Bogdanovic, who's a really good player. Again, the Nets, if they want to stay competitive, Bogdanovic will help them do that. Otherwise, they could probably reroute him into a third team here and get more draft assets. Mike Conley, who I do not like his contract at all, but Brooklyn might say, okay, if we put these players around Ben Simmons, maybe we find a Kyrie Irving trade and bring in someone like Russell Westbrook or some other collection of players. We can maybe try and win 40 games and have all these draft picks coming in. Now, is that what I would want to do? Maybe not, but this is what Brooklyn could conceivably decide to do. Not saying that it's the right move, but there's a realm and there's a real possibility here that Utah would be interested in something like this. You get Malik Beasley back if you're Brooklyn, another player who maybe you try and reroute somewhere, especially when he becomes an expiring contract next offseason. 2023 first, another 2023 first via Minnesota, a 2025 first, a 2025 first via Minnesota, 2027 first, another 2027 first via Minnesota, 2 2029 first, of course, Utah's and Minnesota's, plus pick swaps in 2024, 2026, and 2028. So you're getting 3 pick swaps. You are also getting 2 firsts each year. So this is an 11 pick trade rights to 11 draft selections. That is going to be one of the biggest, most historic trades in NBA history, which is exactly what Brooklyn reportedly wants. You know, you see articles saying that Brooklyn wants the biggest offer ever. This is about as close to it as you can get. 11 draft picks. Essentially, you're getting about 75% of what, you know, Sam Presti traded his whole roster for in one deal. You're getting that in one deal for a 34-year-old player, by the way. The Jazz get Kevin Durant, and they'd also get Seth Curry here to make the money work, since they are sending out quite a bit of money. But for Utah, the idea then is you have your starting lineup probably includes Donovan, Patrick Beverley. You've got Kevin Durant in there. Vanderbilt can play quite a bit. And then you probably are a little concerned at center. You know, you don't have a ton of flexibility there at the center spot. Walker Kessler might have to start, but if you have two of the best bucket getters in the world in Mitchell and Kevin Durant, you're legit. So again, I don't think this is going to happen. I think this is one of the more fun ones to talk about, and more of an imaginary trade package. Would I bet on this happening? No, but if Utah really feels like this is their one chance to get a star player, Kevin Durant under a 4-year contract feels pretty good to me. And then suitor number 5 here, Atlanta Hawks at this spot. And people are going to say, whoa, you think Atlanta has a chance to do this after a DeJounte Murray trade? They actually didn't sacrifice as much of their flexibility as people think, because they traded their 2023 first that they had from Charlotte. It does not really mitigate some of their own flexibility in terms of making trades. So what would I not give up if I'm running Atlanta? Well, Travis Schlenk is going to say, well, we just traded for DeJounte. We gave up quite a bit for him. We're not going to trade him. And Trae Young's our franchise guy. Those two players are untouchable. The idea and the decision to go after Kevin Durant would be to build, again, a big three, kind of like what we talked about in Phoenix. But this makes some more sense for Atlanta because their core is younger. DeJounte Murray, Trae Young, both younger than Devin Booker. You are running a little bit of less risk here if you're Atlanta in terms of the long-term picture, giving up all the draft picks and really moving off of some of your other good young players, which is exactly what they would do here. The Nets get Clint Capella, John Collins, Onyeka Okongwu. That's 3 really good front court players there already. Capella, starting level player. John Collins, an above starting level player. Onyeka Okongwu is a really good young big who I think has a tremendously high ceiling if he ever, gets to live up to that role. We'll see. But again, if you're trading for a player who's young, Okongwu is a guy that, you probably would want to bank on that potential, which is already a really good starting point. But Bogdan Bogdanovic, so again, you're getting another really high quality player here who's a starting caliber player in this league. And for Atlanta's perspective, after bringing in DeJounte, if you trade for Kevin Durant, you don't need a Bogdanovic anymore. You would need to try and go out and find, some role players that fit this team. You also send out Jalen Johnson in this, who is another former first-round pick. You're getting really a lineup of good players. You have 5 good players coming in. I talked about, the Toronto Raptors being able to send the best young core in terms of Achua, Anunoby, and Trent. This is really darn close. Now, this team is not as young. Capella's a little bit older, but Collins not old yet at this point. Okongwu is really young. Bogdanovic is nearing 30. But this is where, if Brooklyn really wanted to, you let these players come in, shine a little bit, trade them out, or you could facilitate this into a 3, 4, 5-team deal. Maybe send Capella somewhere, send Collins somewhere, and bring in extra assets on top of this. You get a 2023 first, 2024 pick swap, 2026 pick swap, which is a 3-team swap with San Antonio, Brooklyn, and Atlanta, which would ultimately lead Brooklyn to having the second best selection out of these 3 teams, and Atlanta would be left with the third best, a 2028 pick swap, and a 2029 first. So again, you're not getting as many draft assets, but if the goal there in Brooklyn is to be competitive, the only thing you're really missing is a point guard with this team. And if you want to go out and get a Russell Westbrook and a Kyrie Irving trade, there's a chance for that here. Now, again, does it mean you're going to be a really great team? Does it mean you're going to be a playoff team? No, but it probably means you're going to not be the worst team in the league if this is your starting lineup. And ultimately, there's real hunger there in Brooklyn to not be giving Houston unprotected picks in the top 5. That's an obvious. And then the Hawks get Kevin Durant and Seth Curry. Again, I think this is an obvious for Atlanta. And for the Nets, people like to talk about their leverage. They really don't have leverage. Kyrie Irving is an expiring contract. They risk losing him for nothing, which, I don't think he's even that valuable to begin with. So maybe they just roll it over and say, okay, Kyrie, okay, Kevin Durant, you guys are on our roster. Just play next year. And then there's the chance that, maybe they just don't exert all the effort that they need to. They miss some team meetings. They kind of make the whole situation uncomfortable. And every single second that you don't trade him is a second that has expired off that contract. And I'm telling you right now, teams are not going to give up as much for a 35-year-old Kevin Durant with 3 years left on his deal as they are for a 34-year-old Kevin Durant with 4 years left on his deal. There's a very big difference there between those two situations and scenarios. And if Kevin Durant doesn't come back and have again another all-star or superstar caliber season, he's obviously going to have an all-star caliber season. But let's say Tatum kind of performs at the same level as Kevin Durant next year, and Luka probably surpasses Kevin Durant. Giannis stays at the top. Kevin Durant's value probably dwindles a little tiny bit. Brooklyn doesn't have as much leverage as I think everyone likes to assume that they really do because of the contract spot. So let's talk about team number 6 that could go out and make a move. And this is kind of the hometown favorite here, Washington Wizards. Could they go out and land Kevin Durant in a deal? This one I'm more skeptical on as well, but I wanted to include them because there's been some rumors. So what would I not give up? Bradley Beal or Kristaps Porzingis. Beal, obviously, the reason why he just signed an extension. If you're going to win, you have Beal on your roster. For Porzingis, again, I think he's a valuable player in this league, but right now his trade value doesn't look that way. I'm not going to give up Kristaps Porzingis for nickels on the dollar. Okay, I'm not going to give up a very good young player who, yes, he has injury history, but when he's healthy and playing, he's one of the better players in the world. I'm not just giving him up in a deal here if it's not going to bring back value to me and if they're not going to look at it favorably from Brooklyn's perspective. So here's the potential deal. Nets receive Kyle Kuzma, Denny Avdia, Corey Kispert, Rui Hachimura, Will Barton. You're getting 5 solid players. Now, again, I don't think this is as good as what Toronto offers. I don't think this is as good as what Atlanta can offer, but you get some picks here as well. The one thing, Washington does not have their 2023 first, still from the John Wall, Russell Westbrook trade, which I didn't really love that for Washington when they executed that deal. Obviously, it worked out pretty well because the Lakers bailed them out big time. But now here they are, 2024 swap, 2025 first, 2026 swap, 2027 first, 2028 swap, and a 2029 first. Washington pushes all their chips in to win a big-time season, have a big-time year with Monte Morris, Bradley Beal. Probably look at Kevin Durant playing the 3 again, Porzingis playing the 4, and then you have at the 5 Daniel Gafford. You've got a lot of talent then on that starting lineup. The depth is a little questionable for sure there in Washington, but the top end talent is so enormous. You have so much length, size, shot blocking, versatility, offensive firepower that you'd have to at least put Washington into the contenders category, which would be a huge step forward for them. Now you do give up a lot of your future. And I think this is, if you're Brooklyn, you're saying, okay, we're getting a vast collection of solid young players. It doesn't maybe move the needle for us now, but could Kuzma, Avdia, Kispert, Rui all become solid to good players? I think so. I think that's a pretty easy bet to make. And then for Kevin Durant going to Washington, again, he's 34 years old. So that 2029 first, if Sean Marks feels like he's still going to be in position there to be the general manager by 2027, 2029, you could be looking at some really valuable assets as well, just given Washington's age and some injury history with Porzingis as well. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you guys did enjoy today's video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and also subscribe. And if you want to know more for a specific team, say your favorite team or anything like that about, potential Kevin Durant trades, go ahead, DM me on Twitter. The link is in the bio for that, and I'll answer all of your basketball questions regarding Kevin Durant, wherever you think he could go. And if you just want to share potential trades with me, I'd love to see them. I like really looking at what you guys have to say, reading your comments and everything like that. So again, thanks so much for watching, guys. Let me know in the comment section what you thought, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.